To remove an FSA gossamer crank, you'll need either a 10mm Allen key or a 10mm hex socket. Now when you're undoing this, you'll find it'll slacken off and then it'll start to tighten again. This is the self-extracting assembly working. Just keep going. So we're loose now, it's just starting to tighten, so use the wrench again. It will slowly take the crank arm off. Probably okay to go with an Allen key now, should be easier. Yeah. It comes off in one assembly. Now you can take off the wavy washer. There's a spacer. And there's the bearing seal, which you can just slowly prise out. And then that's the bearing. Now we need to tap this crank arm out. Just a few taps on here should be enough. And then this one comes free. Now you can see on this side we've got the bearing seal. As before, there's also a spacer on there as well. This is the BB30 bearing assembly. You've got a bearing pressed into the frame, and to stop it going completely in there's a circlip just behind it, and the same the other side. This bearing is nice and smooth, but the one on the other side is notchy, so that was causing my click clack noise. These are some of the parts I'll need for the job. I've got a bearing kit. It's got 2 bearings, 2 seals, circlips which I don't need, the wavy washer and the spacers I'll have to use from the old installation, some lithium grease, an FSA bearing installation tool. These are basically holders just to hold the bearings whilst you're pressing them in, a bearing removal tool, and a very basic press. This was from eBay, all very cheap. The idea with this tool is to insert it behind the bearing and then thread this through the other side and then slowly knock it with a hammer, turning as you go. I'll do the other side first and see how we get on. Okay. I'm just going to tap and then slowly move the tool round to get it in a different position. Tap again. And that's slowly coming out. It seems to be true. So we'll keep going. It's quite difficult because you've got to try and stop the frame from moving. I'm doing that with my hand whilst holding the tool. It'd be better if you could get a piece of wood or something like that behind it to take the shock. Okay. Oh, the bearing's out. Right, to try and improve the effectiveness of this tool, I've got a piece of wood and drilled a 16mm hole in it, which is just the right size for that. And so if I put the tool in avoid the circlip and then get my piece of wood, it holds the tool quite snugly and also gives me something to strike against. Okay. I'm just going to turn the tool round. I think it's important to do this from different positions so it drifts out square. Okay. Right, obviously you're going to hit the wood at some point, so I just need to check, see if the bearings moved at all. Which it has. So it's hit this wood, so I can't use that anymore. At least it's got it going. Okay. Just turn it round. Excuse me. Okay. Oh. It's going. Just a few more little taps, I think that'll be gone. Just turn the tool round. Okay. And it's out. Okay, now the bearings are out, you can see the circlips which are left in during the extraction. I've confirmed these surfaces are nice and clean, and there don't seem to be any scuff marks or any damage from removal, so that's good. Now the installation tool has a part which goes on one side, obviously I'll go around here, and then the other side you have this part which holds the bearing. Now this is very important because you don't want to be pushing on the inner surface and damaging the bearing during installation. So this is to protect the bearing. So you offer that up and then use the press to squeeze either side. I'm going to do one at a time to make sure it's accurately pressed in. I'm just putting a little bit of this lithium grease on this surface just to help ease the bearing in. I've used this tool to hold the bearing and I've just pushed it by hand so it's as square as it can be into the bracket. I'll use this piece on the other side and then I'll use the bearing press to squeeze the two parts together. I've fitted the bearing press as accurately as I can. Obviously it doesn't have the guides as a professional press would do, so you've got to make sure it's absolutely centre. Then you can use a spanner on the nut on this side and then slowly, whilst watching it, tighten this side and it should squeeze the bearing in. I'm not using much force and I'm just keeping an eye on the bearing just to make sure it's going in evenly. You don't want to damage the bottom bracket. Just keep on going until you hit the circlip. There. Now I can disassemble. First bearing in. Okay, I'm going to repeat the process this side. Put a little bit of the grease on this surface. Get the bearing tool and just offer it up by eye. Just see if I can get it to hold by itself, but absolutely square. I did just give a gentle tap just to try and make sure it's perfectly square before I start using the press. Right, that looks good. So I'm going to use the other part of the press on the other side. Now this will be offered against the bearing surface, but it'll be hitting this part as well as this part, so it's not going to put any pressure on the inside. And then I'll use the press to squeeze these two together, and hopefully that'll just slip in. Right, I've tried to ensure that this press is as square as it can be. Obviously it doesn't have the guides of the professional press. That looks okay, so I'm going to get my spanner, hold the nut on the other side and slowly operate the press while keeping an eye on the bearing. Now that slipped a little bit, I'm not happy, I'm going to have to stop and just realign this. Okay, try again. I disassembled the press and then used the bearing installation tool against the bearing and just tapped it very gently on the side where it was slightly skewed. Reassembled the press and I'm going to have another go. Hopefully this time it'll go in. I could sort of tell it wasn't right because it started to skew. Just doing a little bit again now. Hopefully I can keep it central. Yep, that's going in okay. Don't need to apply excessive pressure. If you are, something's probably going wrong. And again, just drive it in until it hits the circlip. Don't go too hard. Well, that feels about right. Okay, we can disassemble and that's it, job done. Right, that bearing seemed to press in okay, and it's nice and smooth. I think if you caused any damage it'd probably be notchy, but they both feel okay. I'm going to use some of the lithium grease on this surface. Now originally it didn't have any. I think that was part of the problem. I think I got some water ingress. So I'm going to put some grease on. And a little bit on this surface as well. And then same the other side. Right, I've put a bit of grease on this crank here. I'll put on the spacer. Then the new seal from the bearing kit. And then offer that up. Now hopefully it's not going to take too much persuasion to slide in. There we are. I've just put a little grease on this splined part here. Then I can put on the new seal, the spacer, and then the wavy washer. Right, I've put the crank on. That's hand tight now. I just need a torque wrench to torque it up between 38 and 41 Newton meters, it says there. So using my hex head socket. Seems quite a lot. There we go. Alright, all done. Nice and smooth.